Welcome to another weekly featured business brought to you by Visibility Impact and your host, James Moffat, where he will gracefully take our featured guest on a personal and business journey and stories that will inspire, educate, and engage you.
Hello, and welcome to another Friday featured business brought to you by Visibility Impact and your host, myself, James Moffat. Today we have our 150th guest, so a landmark for us. So 𝗬𝗘𝗔𝗏𝗧, right? Welcome to the show.
James, thank you for having me and all that you do.
Absolute pleasure. So we met on LinkedIn. So a bit of a plug for LinkedIn. It can be great for some things. So great for meeting new people. Right. So, Ray, I'm very fascinated about your story. I've had a look at your website and your profile, and you resonate a lot with me. And I want you to share your story with the audience. So this will be available at the end. We'll edit it and clean it up and put it on YouTube. It'll go automatically to Rumble as well, and Spotify for those that like to listen just to the audio. So without further ado, Ray, our 150th guest, right? You should get a medal for that. Right. First of all, tell us, because we have an audience from all over the world and we have guests from all over the world. So Ray, where are you living now and where are you originally from?
Same place, just about a 30-mile difference. I was born and raised in Chicago, part on the southwest side called Beverly, and went to school, University of Illinois down in Champaign, and then married my wife Ann in 1987, and 1989 we moved to Mokena, Illinois, where we still live. That's about 35 miles southwest of Chicago.
Wow. So been married a few years?
36, I believe. I'm sorry, 37. 37.
Yeah, if she's going to watch this, she'll have to correct you. Right. So congratulations. Right. So have you any siblings?
I have two younger brothers. And my wife comes from a big family. There was 9, and she is the second from the youngest. So when they match up spouses, the perfect match is like the oldest with the youngest. So we're almost perfect.
Yeah, very good. Right. And yeah, so yeah, celebrating at parties and I mean, birthdays and family gatherings. I mean, there must be a lot of that going on.
Well, we have 7 kids, so there's
7?
no shortage. Yes.
Wow. Did you intend to have 7?
We talked about these things before we got married, and I promised Ann I would do my best to get her to 4. And so we had boy, boy, girl, girl. The Irish call it the $1 million family, because the girls have their big brothers. When their big brothers go away, the mother still has the girls. And I'm pretty much free to do whatever I want. So, but then we had our third daughter, Grace, and then our third son, Thomas. And then we had Joseph, the caboose. And no, none of them were accidents or mistakes or anything like that. We just, left it to God, and things turned out the way they turned out.
Excellent. But no twins?
Well, actually, the first time my wife was pregnant, she was pregnant with twins. Unfortunately, it was an ectopic pregnancy. And then there was one other miscarriage along the way. So really, if it all worked out, there would have been 10. But our second son and oldest daughter are 14 months apart. And their appearance, we could tell people that they were a male-female twin, which is very rare, and they would believe it.
Excellent.
Because they look so much alike.
Yeah. So I know we could talk about kids all day, because I mean, I have 3, and that's a handful, and 2 are twins.
Okay.
Right. So
that must have been absolutely crazy to have twins as newborns.
The thing is, we had a 3-year-old, and we thought we want, a brother or sister for him. So we thought, yeah, either would be happy as long as he has a brother or a sister. So then when my wife knew that she was pregnant, we went along to confirm the pregnancy with the ultrasound or the ultrascan. And the doctor said, oh, there's one here. Oh, and another one there. And we thought, this is a joke. Don't joke like that. Because the last thing that we wanted was twins. We'd never considered twins. And it was true. It was twins. So we didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I think we did both, actually. But anyway, more than happy that 3 beautiful kids. Love them to bits. And they're all completely different personalities. But the one thing they share in common is their sense of humor. And that is great. So with 3, we found it tough. So I don't know how what's the ages now of them? I mean, from the oldest to the youngest.
Oldest is 35 and the youngest just turned 18. But the key to a big family is the older kids are built-in babysitters.
Mm-hmm.
And they watch their younger siblings like hawks. So it's not, I would say it gets exponentially easier, not exponentially harder. Because the other big thing is they have great role models. In other words, my wife's side of the family is exceptionally intelligent. And I don't do too bad myself, but I have the athletic part. So our kids have just excelled. And there's always been a sense of competition for the younger ones to keep up with the older ones. And it's been really cool to see that. And the best part of it is the way they've been supported by the older kids. You know, they haven't been discouraged or anything.
Yeah.
You know, it's more like, hey, you better be better than me for all the effort I'm, putting in to help you, or this, that, or the other,
Yeah.
So it's really a cool dynamic.
So you're not a granddad yet then?
No. Our first, which is Thomas, who's our 6th child, 3rd boy, he's getting married in June. And his bride-to-be fits right in. She's just very intelligent. Tomboy, comes from a very loving family. And, all the girls, love her. I mean, everybody loves her. So it's like she's been around so much that it's
excellent.
That's all happening in June, and we couldn't be more blessed.
Excellent. So just going back to what you said, I would like to think that in my family, my wife is the educated one. So I would say the kids get the intelligence from my wife. Although I wouldn't say I'm stupid, but I would say that intelligence. They definitely get their sports from me. So they're very athletic. And I excelled at sports. But the most important thing that I would say that I give them is common sense. And that's something you can't buy.
Yeah, I think if I had to say one thing that stands out is to be counter to to what's popular, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
I always told my kids, if you're worried about being invited to the cocktail party, you're in trouble. And it's just, and we can get into this later in the interview, but I was red-pilled in 1983 when I was 24 years old. And a big reason that happened is the people that red-pilled me recognized that I had no problem being outspoken, if you will, but in a respectful way. In other words, I just took it upon myself that if no one was going to say anything, I was going to be the person to say anything to make sure that person didn't get away with what they were trying to get away with.
So let's come back to that in a minute. So you mentioned the kind of the schooling and everything. Let's get to that point. So, I mean, so growing up, I mean, you said you were athletic. So kind of what sports and things did you do? And then let's kind of move that with the education. Where did you go when you left school?
So I ended up at the University of Illinois. I'd been accepted there. There was other places that I had opportunities to go and play football, and I spare all those details. But I ended up at Illinois and played there for 2 years when we were terrible. It was Gary Muller's first year. Before spring football of my junior year was going to start, I realized that they weren't going to keep their promises, and so I had enough. Actually, it was spring semester my sophomore year in anticipation, of the junior season. And after I left, another 33, 34 guys left, and they fired Moeller after that season. They brought in Mike White. A neighbor of mine is Billy Callahan, and he was the head coach for the Raiders in the NFL after Gruden went to Tampa Bay. He'd been the head coach at Nebraska. But Billy really understood his football and trained me when I was still in high school. He's 3 years older than me. And he ended up on Mike White's staff as a grad assistant, told him about me. They had my film and said, hey, we want you to come back and play. And I said no. And one of my biggest regrets 2 years later, which would have been my senior year as a redshirt, Mike White had him back at the Rose Bowl, which is like one of the major bowls here in the U.S. before the college championship stuff came in. But football was my thing in college. Baseball was my favorite sport. And I loved playing basketball. I spent all the time that I wasn't at practice playing basketball. And I also played hockey in high school, and they had a hockey club at Illinois that guys that I played against in high school were on, and I got invited to skate with them for a week, and then they decide if they want you or not, and I got extended an invitation to play with the hockey club, but I couldn't get out of winter conditioning, so I couldn't do both, because hockey was at night from 9 until whenever, 11:30, midnight. That's just when the ice was available. But
are you a big guy then?
Yeah, I mean, I've shrunk as you get older, but I measured out in college at 6'2" and 190.
Wow.
So, and I was fit. I mean, when they measured me for body fat, they kept taking a double take because I was the lowest they had ever measured. I was just under 3%, and according to the charts, that wasn't possible.
Excellent.
But, anyway.
So do you still do any sports now then?
I had played golf. That was another thing I played in high school, and I probably could have gone and played in college. My mom started me skiing when I was 5. So the golf and skiing had always been a big part of my life. But by the time I want to say I was 36, 37, all that stuff just really started falling away, because our kids were all multiple sport athletes, and they were consistently, the top athletes or one of the top athletes on their teams. And I got involved in coaching, and that just became all consuming. So the skiing and the golf fell by the wayside.
Yeah, we're quite fortunate here in Switzerland, because there's many different sports. You've got all the winter sports now, so the skiing, so that all the kids ski, and yeah, they're better than me now, which I knew at some point they would be better. Now I can't catch them going down the mountains. They're too quick for me, and they've got no fear. So any bumps or anything, they go airborne and love it. I avoid them, right? And yeah, with other sports, I mean, we try everything, and I'm competitive as well. So it's like try to beat daddy, but they quickly catch up, and they're better than me at most things now, most sports. I'm still got the edge on them at running, because I used to be one of the quickest runners in my year. Well, for the school, I was always the quickest, but now I'm slow in comparison, but still quicker than them. So, but they're fast, they're catching me. So it's not going to be long before they're much better than I am. And we also do now ping pong, which is so much fun. And
yeah, my kids, excuse me for 1 second. Hopefully you can edit that out. My kids always ask, Dad, why do we always have ping pong tables and not a pool table?
Yeah.
And I said to them, hopefully you'll never witness it, but if you witness one bar fight with cue sticks, you'll never have a pool table.
Yeah. No, we were on holiday and they had a pool table and ping pong, but we found that after many games of pool, we preferred the ping pong. And it was much more fun, and you could improve your game, whereas maybe you could with pool, but it didn't have the same excitement. When you get like a ball in ping pong, like the unbelievable ball you've got back, and you've got that point, it's great. Love it.
Yeah, and especially when you have a group, it moves fast. If you're playing to 11, you can rotate people through, and
exactly.
Just everybody becomes mesmerized watching. It's like,
yeah.
My middle brother used to have a world ranking in tennis, and that was another thing that we all got did. And just watching a good tennis match, especially if you understand the game, you just become consumed by it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, they do. There's a new sport here, and not so much in Switzerland, but we saw it in other parts of Europe, called paddle, and that looks great. Yeah, it's like a cross between tennis and squash.
Yeah, but except it really hurts if you fall down.
It looks
because
good
because of the sandpaper surface. We had a racquetball court at our tennis club that people played through the winter. So that's you can really beat yourself up playing that game.
Yeah, I haven't done it, but it looks good. So many different sports to try out. But anyway, we digress. So let's get back on track. So with school and everything, when you finish, kind of what was work life like? I mean, what did you do?
Well, I went to Illinois just kind of like, all right, I'm in. I know it's a good school. Really didn't know what
Let me just pause there. I was going to ask, I completely forgot. Why did you not go back to the football then when you got that invite?
It would just take too much time to explain. There was multiple situations. The one I really wanted, I literally got canceled because I was a a white kid. I mean, it's crazy. They knew I was a white kid. That happened to be an Ivy League school. And there was, it's really crazy. The head coach was the first head coach in the Ivy League, 𝗙𝗘𝗔𝗧𝗪. And I'm going to stop because I don't want to jeopardize anything.
But you're happy with that decision that you made?
The only thing that I'm not happy about is I said no to Billy and didn't go back and play for Mike White.
All right.
And that's, my regret. I'll leave it at that.
But did you reach out to him afterwards and say?
I think he's probably still mad at me.
All right. Okay.
So, I mean, we've talked a little bit. He, obviously was down on campus, and then he got just consumed by the NFL and has, been out of Chicago his whole career.
Okay.
In other words, or with different NFL teams.
Okay. We'll save this story for another one.
Okay.
All right. So, yeah, I'm curious on kind of where you went after school and what work did you do? And because I've read, obviously, the notes that you sent, and very interesting.
Right. So I was fortunate enough. Illinois had the top-rated accounting program in the nation when I graduated. And that was back in 1981. And this was at a time when Illinois, like other most very competitive schools, they took great pride in having a low graduation rate. In other words, the School of Engineering, the School of Accounting, if their graduation rate was above 30%, they felt like they were doing something wrong. So it was very competitive to get through that program. That's one of the reasons I didn't go back out to play football, because now I'm in the program, and I chose the program. It was during the Carter years, and it was terrible here in the States, probably in many other places in the world. But it was because of its reputation in engineering and accounting. Guys, gals that graduated with those degrees got jobs. Everyone else was struggling or going on to get their masters and, trying to make themselves more marketable. But Illinois was the first place where the Big Eight back then, instead of the Big Four, came to interview. I was fortunate enough to get hired by Arthur Andersen, which was the best of the best back then. And I ended up in their small business audit and tax division, which was what everyone wanted to get into because it was like the incubator. As a public accountant, it's such a small percentage that make partner. What ends up happening, the majority of the time, public accountants end up going to work for one of their clients. And small business audit and tax was a great incubator. I mean, this is back in 1981, 1982. Waste Management, Cisco, those were the companies that were in small business audit and tax. And I did that for just a little over a year and a half, but my two younger brothers had been trading at the Chicago Mercantile Exchange, and they were just keeping after me, come on, you got to come do this. You got to come do this. And I'm like, I busted my ass to get my degree, pass the CPA. I'm in the best place. It actually started on my master's in tax at DePaul. And finally, I just realized I wasn't happy in that environment just because of the workplace dynamics. Just the things that you have to do to keep moving up. Let's just, the brown nosing and the backstabbing, if you will. And that's something that, I'm not that person. I know a lot of people do it begrudgingly just to survive. But not only that it was my own experience, I was seeing this out at audit clients. One of the big things, probably the biggest thing a staff accountant does is when we go out on these audits is we interview people. Tell us what you do, how you do it. Because what we want to do is validate they understand the procedures so we can validate that the controls are effective, that they're being followed. So we have some confidence when we start getting into, auditing purchase orders and invoices and bank statements and, receivables and all of these things, that we can do it with a high degree of confidence, and, that they understand the procedures so the controls are working as intended. But they share a lot. Or at least they would share a lot with me. I've always been pretty easy to talk to, and I understood going in that they were very nervous and had a lot of apprehension. I'd literally say, look, just relax. I just need you to tell me what you do so I know the controls. I told them exactly what I was listening for. I'm not here to trick you up on anything. They're like, okay, fine. This is blah, blah, blah. And so it would go like that, but then they'd spend another big chunk of time telling me about their work environment. And, that was, it's like being in the confessional. I never shared any of it with anybody, but they trusted me. And, you'd be on site for weeks or sometimes months. And it just bothered me. So I had the opportunity to go to the trading floor. It was much more suited. Like I said, I'm a big athletic guy. I was on my feet in the trading pit. There's footage on YouTube. You can do a search on S&P 500, live futures. It was the most rock'em sock'em pit in the industry. And I did that for a little over 20 years. But It just, the physicality of it, the competitiveness, what it demanded, it just suited me.
So two of your brothers worked there?
Yes, they were trading in the euro dollars, and then my one brother came over to the S&P, and the other brother stayed in the euro dollars. But as I was watching all of this from early on, and one of the things that just really made it easy for me to leave Andersen is on the trading floor, there was no BS. I mean, I'm not saying that people didn't like or dislike each other. I'm not saying there wasn't stuff going on for brokers to get certain accounts to execute that business in the pit. I'm not saying none of that went on. But what I am saying, when push came to shove, everyone did everything they could to make their commitment to being precise and clean. I mean, we're exchanging contracts just with hand signals and voice, and creating incredible outtrade risk. In other words, if price or quantity doesn't match up, or even the worst is, I think I made a trade with you, but you actually made a trade with the person over my shoulder or down in front of me. And now, if I bought them, or at least thought I did, and the market opens, 10 basis points higher, and I don't have the contracts that I thought I bought, even if it's one contract, and we're 10 basis points higher, this is back when a point was $500, I'm out $5,000. If it's 10 contracts, it's $50,000. If it's two, it's 10. So we went out of our way to have each other's back. And it was just, you either sold them or you bought them. There was no discussion. It was just done. It wasn't like, well, I didn't, I really don't want to do this trade. There was none of that, because everything just moved so fast. And so I thought to myself, if you could take, and I'm going to use the word culture. I was using the word culture, back in the 80s before it became a thing, because of the transition to the digital workplace, if you will. But if you could take that trading floor culture, the level of trust that was essential to be able to compete in that environment. In other words, if you weren't trusted, nobody was going to trade with you. But if you could take that into a business environment, an organization, my God, everything would change. because the members of that environment would understand, you know, as a professional, I'm only as good as the information that's flowing to and through me. So instead of playing all of these games of backstabbing and brown nosing, they would be focused on making their intentions as transparent as possible so that information is flowing. And how do you create that transparency? It's by protecting those around you. So now you get incredible information flow. Awareness goes way up because you're not wasting energy and all the other stuff. And you become way more efficient anticipating client, customer, team, organization needs. And that's a tremendous advantage. And so anyway, that's what I've commercialized once, you know, we get to that part. But that whole transition from Andersen to trading floor, and then my experiences on that trading floor, and then plus that strong ethics foundation from the University of Illinois, kind of brought it all together where I could start connecting the dots.
Yeah. So 20 years of that pressure must be a hell of a time.
Well, the good part about it was we had a bunch of little kids, you know, starting our family. So I would leave work, and I really didn't have a whole lot of time to think about what happened. I mean, I could decompress on the 45-minute drive it took me to get home. But once I got home, I was either going out the door to coach, or I was picking up one of the babies to give my wife a break. I'll never forget, 𝗪𝗘𝗏 was our fourth. And fortunately, she was our only colicky baby. But she just, for about a 3-4 month period, I mean, if she wasn't sleeping, she was crying and screaming. And I would come up off the trading floor. I had a clean undershirt and, you know, shirt, to put on, because I knew when I walked in the door, Ann was going to hand me 𝗪𝗧𝗪𝗏. And I would take 𝗪𝗧𝗪𝗏, and I had this real nice big blue leather lazy boy recliner rocker, and I would just sit down and, you know, whatever it took, it was like, you know, when you got a task, you know, you're not quitting on the task, right? And I'd take 𝗪𝗧𝗪𝗏, and I would just know, you know, whatever it takes, you know, and then she would comfort and go to sleep for a while and wake up, and we would start over again. But like, for the most part, all of those years in the pit, I was just consumed by my family when I wasn't there. And I was also started local knowledge that time. And so, you know, I was working the equivalent of 60, 70, sometime 80 hours a week, and then also trying to do everything I could to fit in to meet my family requirements. So you didn't have a whole lot of time to get caught up in the pressure, if you will.
Yeah, I can imagine. I mean, yeah, as I said, with 3 kids, it is tough. So with 7 and an intense job like that, I mean, I had maybe not similar, but I mean, from what you said about basically building up that trust and having each other's back, I noticed in many of the kind of the corporate type jobs I had, then it wasn't like that. I was in sales, and I found that, yeah, software sales, selling, you needed the team. And I would always use the analogy of a soccer team. I said, you need the goal scorers, you need to score the deals, but you need the whole team to get them the ball, because if they don't get the ball, they can never score. And I chose the teamwork. So I looked at the organizations that I worked for. I didn't see that at the beginning. I just went in there. I'm the sales guy. Get out there and sell, right? If you don't get your quota, then look for another job. And you're fighting against the other sales guys because they want to get their quota and they don't want to lose their job. So it was never teamwork. It was competing against your own team, right? And then when it came to marketing, getting any marketing resources, no, it was the survival of the fittest. Whoever brown-nosed the most would get the resources because they would buddy them, and then you'd be left behind. So, yeah, I just found that I did that for years until I realized that this is not how you do business. You sell business on trust and teamwork and being together and supporting one another, not looking for a scapegoat when you don't get the quota and you're fired. So I know we'll kind of come on to that a bit later, but it's just for what you said, being in the pit and that trust. So
the other thing that really helped me, my position was quarterback. And I was actually a minority in my high school. And we played in the Red South in the Chicago Public League. And we were the only team that had any white guys on it. And it was the toughest division in the city, the Red South. It was us, CVS, Phillips, Fenger, Parker High School, Simeon. It was just, it was a battle. And, as a quarterback, you learn real quick. You got to be like the coach on the field. So when anyone's getting that starry-eyed look or needs confirmation for their assignment, how we're going to do this protection, what's the blocking, you've got to know it all, but you've got to sense it before they need to ask it. So they're not embarrassed, if you will, or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So you just get all of this awareness. And that really helped me in the trading pit, and certainly helped me tremendously as a coach with kids, being able to anticipate those things. But in business, no one has that mindset, and it's really, and nobody's the bad guy or the bad girl for not having it. They've just been unfortunately conditioned to behave that way. And it has been very methodical, very evil. And they have been conditioned to behave that way so they can't realize their potential, so they can be frustrated. Then when people are frustrated, they're that much easier to manipulate and control.
Yeah, I can completely agree. Just looking back at my history of work in my career, I can't recall having a good boss. I mean, I say boss because none of them were leaders. And I've had many, many bad bosses, ones that, put fear into you, that every day that when the phone rang and you could see the boss's name on your phone, it's kind of shivers down your spine. And I mean, in an environment that you shouldn't have to endure, but I mean, that seemed to be the norm because every company seemed to be the same as the last one. And the mentality and the approach. And I always think, why don't people like work together? I mean, why don't we help one another? Why don't we focus on the vision of the company and all work together to make that happen? It just never worked like that.
Well, unfortunately, HR, or, the way culture is, vision, and then they try and get everyone aligned to that, but they don't go to the underlying behaviors. That's why they keep self-sabotaging. It's just all for marketing purposes, if you will. But when you talk about boss, that was another thing that I was really blessed. I caddied as a kid, and it turns out I was caddying at Beverly Country Club. We had the biggest caddy program in the nation because of the Evans Scholarship. And the summer of my second year, I was only 14 years old. I think it was late June, early July. The caddy master, Eddie Barr, made me his assistant. I replaced a guy that was 23 years old. And Ed was a fireman. So he was at the firehouse for a 24-hour shift. He was an emergency medical technician. And then he had 48 hours off. Well, when he was on that 24, it's always fallen on a different date. But even if it was during the week, there was 150 plus caddies. On the weekend, it was over 200. And I was responsible for giving their assignments. Everybody knew who tipped what. Everyone had a flat rate. So everyone wanted to obviously caddy for the guys that were going to give the bigger tip. And I was responsible for that. And I obviously was responsible for keeping order in the caddy yard. And yeah, I was a little big for my age and always, and I had a good rep because we would play a ton of basketball for money. So I had that going for me. But the reason why I was successful is I did things exactly the way Mr. Barr did. In other words, I didn't play favorites. He didn't play favorites. There was no disruption to what was expected because he had set a high standard, and I just respected that. I understood why it worked, and I just tried to understand it better and better so I could do it better and better, if you will. And in the corporate environment, it has just been so sabotaged away from, those baseline programs, policies, methods that had been time tested. And part of corrupting something is you start calling them into question. And that started happening like crazy in the late 90s as everything started going to a digital environment. It's like all of these things that got us here starting getting diluted or lost accountability to, if you will. And so that has been one of the reasons we've had this big collapse, because we don't understand how we've given away these competitive advantages that are generational, because we've been conditioned to think that we've got to chase the new shiny object. In other words, in business now, it's all about the data, and the data will tell us what to do. And now we've got AI, and that's going to tell us what to do. And I'm like, no. The way it works is you have so much awareness, you understand what the need is and the opportunity for filling that, or what that need is and filling it to maintain and better benefit your customer base, right? And we look at the data to tell us how well we're doing or what we're missing. And so we've created this incredible lag because everyone's mindset now is to let the data tell them what to do instead of having that future vision to stay ahead of need. And that's why we keep getting this growing disconnect between machine advancement and human development. And it's all by design. Another way to look at it, just look at how the education system has been sabotaged. You would think with all of these advancements, education efficiency would be going in leaps and bounds. I mean, the proficiency levels that kids, in fifth grade today would be at where kids in high school were, years ago. We're lucky if high school kids have the proficiency of a fifth grader now. I mean, it's all by design.
I completely agree. I mean, when I was a kid, I used to question things at school. I used to question everything. And I think then I was more open-minded in the way that I wanted to have the answers. So I would ask. But then you'd have the old sayings like, as a kid should shut up and just listen. Don't speak until you're spoken to. And it's rude to talk to an adult unless they ask you a question, unless they speak first. So you always push back for trying to use your imagination and your curiosity. And But at school, I had the opportunity to, if the teacher asked if there's any questions, then to question. And most of the time, they didn't have the answers. So you get into trouble for asking them awkward questions in the class. So it didn't help, and you still didn't know the answers. But if I look back at school then to how my kids are at school now, nothing's changed. It's the same rubbish. I mean, the things that everything is academia driven, and there are zero emotional intelligences, yet there's more children now than ever before that have what you call mental health problems, emotional problems, emotional challenges. And we never heard of that when I was a kid at school, and everyone was happy-go-lucky. And now the kids are suicidal, they're depressed, I mean, it's not just the odd one or two, it's the majority. And
well, you're spot on. And again, I can, from my own experience, I'll tell you how it was done. Both my parents were public school teachers. My dad went on and started his own insurance agency, independent agent, and did very well. Though we were Catholic in south side of Chicago, everyone has their parish. There's no shortage of Catholic grammar schools or high schools to go to. But I went, my youngest brother, Keith, went to Brother Rice. He's the only one that went to a Catholic high school, and he got double promoted, so he did 8th grade again at Christ the King, our parish Catholic school. But at Kellogg, the grammar school that we graduated from, the 8th grade teacher, her name was Marion McManus. We affectionately referred to as Mac. And I would get on the phone once every couple weeks until Mac died. I mean, I was still talking to her when I was in the 20s. She got to be a good friend of my parents along the way. They didn't have a relationship with her until we became her students. And me being the oldest, I was the first. And Mac was a taskmaster. Greatest teacher I ever had. We would have 2 to 3 hours of legitimate homework every night, reading the paper for either a local, national, or international story, having to cut it out and then summarize it. We had to memorize a poem every week and recite it in front of the class. What she did with vocabulary, what she did with accelerated learning. I think it was a Stanford Reading Acceleration Program, SRA, but she would have time that she would work with the kids who were struggling to read a little bit, and then everyone else. It was a contest to see how far along we could get into these SRAs, and they were all color-coded, and, you know, the smarter kids, we were pushing each other to get furthest ahead. I mean, it was crazy. But Mac refused to join the teachers union. Back in the day, the Chicago Public Schools would go out on strike every 2 to 3 years. And, you know, the kids would just be, you know, done for however many days they were out. And Mac, again, was just old school. You know, she was tough. She had a beautiful voice. She was an accomplished piano player. You know, could teach that as well. She ran her church choir. But she did not want to compromise her integrity by being part of the Chicago teachers. She saw what was coming. It was years ahead. So when we would go out, or the teachers would go out on strike, every day at 3 o'clock, we would meet at somebody else's house to drop off our homework assignments and get homework assignments. She didn't miss a beat. And when a parent had experienced the education of their child under Mac, they looked at all the other teachers in the school like, you're all slackers. They couldn't stand Mac. Instead of trying to get up to her bar, they would just bad talk her and this, that, or the other. There was one teacher, Miss Hennessy, who I think she came in when I was in 4th or 5th grade and then became a full, but she tried to emulate Max. She wasn't crushing the lower levels with homework, but she had that level of professionalism in everything else. But why the kids, what you described about all of this mess, psychological warfare works by discouraging accountability to destroy trust, right? In other words, our independence is all a function of self-trust. The more that trust is proportional to accountability. So these kids in school, excuses are being made for them left and right. You're a victim, this, that, or the other. And so the accountability of studying and doing homework, which builds that self-trust, that sense of personal accomplishment, and then just keeps rewarding those that put in the time, understanding the value of discipline and reinforcing it. All that's been ripped out by design, because you end up with frustrated, weak people who become that more and more dependent on the state. And then they're that much more easy to be controlled. I mean, just look at the data, what's happened to proficiency scores in reading and math since the teachers' unions came into the public schools. It's irrefutable. And these kids are so messed up because they've been deprived, unless they've had the benefit of going to a faith-based school that really strives to instill that accountability. And don't get me wrong, there are good, I don't want to paint with a broad brush here, but I'm just looking at the Chicago public school system, what I know and what I've seen happen to it.
Yeah, you're not alone in that. I've had many teachers, I've been guests as well, or ex-teachers that have dropped out of the profession because they couldn't bear kind of the indoctrination rather than education. And yeah, I just, particularly when you've gone through life and you've gone through different jobs, and you start questioning lots of things, and you question your own existence. I always say there's 3 fundamental questions that you ask in your life at some point. The first one being, when you're a child, what will I be when I grow up? And most will say like the spaceman or something like that. But they don't really know. Most of them don't really know. And then even if they did know, is there a path to get there? Right? Probably not. Right? There's no guidance. You're just like, do whatever's on the curriculum and be done with it. And don't think outside the box, because we want to keep you in that box. Right? Then the second time you ask a question is midlife. At some point, after you've experienced different jobs and different bosses, you ask again. You ask, what's it all about? Which I wrote a paper on that. I said, what's it all about, Alfie? Basically after the Michael Caine movie, right? And yeah, but because we question, well, what's it all about? I've had all these jobs. I've had bad bosses. I've made money. I've lost money. I've done all of this. And what's it all about? And you question, and you don't know. And the reason why you don't know is because you've never been on that inward journey to actually know who you are. And in the absence of not knowing who you are, you're confused, and you'll just follow whatever you think is right rather than knowing what is right. And there's a difference. And then the third time that you ask is when you've retired, you've actually left the work environment, you've given up the toxic environment, the bad bosses, the toxic colleagues and whatever, and you think, great, I've retired. And then you ask again, what's next? And again, in the absence of not knowing, typically after a couple of years, you drop dead of boredom because you don't know what you're doing. And to me, the biggest problem there, particularly when, as I mentioned prior to coming on the show, I found a life coach and I learned a lot. I learned a lot about myself that I never knew. And in the absence of not knowing who I was disillusioned with life and everything about it. And I didn't know the direction. And I needed some guidance to know which way I go in life. And 99% of the population don't know either. So in the absence of not knowing who you truly are, you're not living a meaningful, purpose-driven life. And that is something fundamentally that's missing from the educational system, because you'll just follow a criteria which is the same globally, as you said, by design. And if you start looking at more the emotional intelligences and asking questions and then discovering the persona type you are, the emotions, why you feel these emotions, why do you get fear, none of that's addressed at school. I mean, I help my kids address fear through storytelling, and it works. It cures them. But they don't get any of that at school. They go to school with fear. Not anymore, because, like you said, they've made them into pussies.
Well,
They're not tough kids anymore.
Fear is a great, great control mechanism. I want to just jump back to what you said about the retired folks. Again, and this is a great lesson that I learned from caddying. I was there for 5 years. So there's guys that were approaching retirement and then retired while I was there. And you really got to get some sense of who these people were, you know, spending 4+ hours carrying their bag and hearing the banter with the other players, and if they, you know, share anything with you, and then, you know, see that over the course. And the other thing that I benefited from is after my junior year in high school, I stopped as a caddy master, assistant caddy master, and then, you know, went and started loading trucks my last semester in high school. But then my dad joined the club. And then, so I was around a little bit more as a junior member, and there was some of the younger members that were really kind to me, that they were better golfers, and, you know, we had a connection. But then about, I don't know, probably, let's just say 10 years later, after I had been successful as a trader, I joined the club. And then now I'm seeing other guys that who I knew who are now hitting retirement, and boom. And it was the same observation for the most part. These guys were, I'll call the guys in the good equation, because there was good members and there was bad members, right? And good members brought out good guests, bad members. Anyway, so I just focused on the good guys, because that's who I wanted to learn from. I wanted to be a good guy. And first, I'll say 6 to 18 months, they were, you know, retired, you know, and they're playing golf, going down to Florida, going to the games, playing cards, whatever. Sometime after that first 6 to 18 months, it's like a switch flips and they're miserable. Because for the most part, because they're not using this, they're not getting to be who they were really, you know, realizing their potential. And this is another thing that is by design. And the crazy thing is they do this in public accounting. It used to be mandatory retirement at 55 for the partners, so they could keep their workforce incentivized. And a lot had to do with it, with just the crazy hours and pressure that were, you know, put on partners, you know, to signing off on the opinions, entertaining the client, interacting with the audit committee and the other partners, and running the firm and everything else. I mean, these guys had more than a full plate. But even at 6, and they would go on to do other things. You know, they didn't stop working. They just went off somewhere else to probably make even more money. But at 65, we have this incredible wealth. I mean, I'm going to be 65 next month. And there is so much knowledge and energy to share that. I mean, I know I'm not unique in that, but they've got us conditioned to ride off into the sunset because they don't want us sharing that knowledge. I mean, my peers, the late baby boomers, if you will, we remember the Kennedy assassination. We remember the free love, everything changing in the 60s. Remember the civil rights movement with Martin Luther King. Like I said, I went to a high school where I was a minority. And I remember how much we were alike and not different, and how we went to have each other's back. I mean, on the football team, the black guys took care of the black guys that were a problem. The white guys took care of the white guys that were a problem. And it just brought us closer and closer together because the guys that were cleaning up, we were role models for the problems. And the problem said, you know what? Those guys are pretty successful. I should probably stop being a problem. And that kind of, you know, filtered out because the jocks are usually thought of as the cool guys and gals. And so, you know, we have the power of having influence by being good role models. But that power for those retired, they don't want people with a memory that understand what was possible and have a life history of how it was corrupted. They can't wait to push those people out the door because they don't want them saying, hey, wait a minute, you know, there was some things that we did back here that really worked and we've stopped doing them, and here's the consequences. We can see it in the data. What's wrong with recognizing our mistakes and going back to the things that worked? I'm not saying that everything was right and that all this new stuff is wrong. You know, there's a lot of great new stuff, but don't throw out the great bad stuff either, right? And so it's those guys and gals that have that history of it that are best positioned to connect the dots. And it'll be the same 50 years from now, 10 years from now. Those folks that are at or near retirement, they're always the best to connect the dots and really protect the next generation that's coming, because that's what happened in the past. You didn't have people retiring. They stayed around to connect the dots to protect people. And again, they're working so hard to get rid of that.
Yeah, completely agree. I've seen it. Once you get typically to 50, you're on the scrap heap. Nobody's interested in you. They want to bring in the younger guy, right, straight from college or something. It's got all the certificates that they need to tick all the boxes, and you can pay them a lot less money, and then they start. But they've never learned the job, and there's never had a handover. They've never had this mentor. They go into it basically all full of themselves with their certificates, flashing their certificates around, but they're completely clueless to the job. And the good guy that's been there, seen it all, done it, seen all the ways and the mistakes, no, we're not interested in him. He's over 50. We can't have that guy anymore. He's too expensive. So get rid of them.
Well, they'll keep them until they train the new guys. We had a situation here in the United States, I believe it's called the H-1B visa, that allowed foreign workers. It was really for foreign engineers. And I could get into the politics behind it and who was involved and who benefited, but I won't. I will just say this, and this is from clients that I had on my trading company, Trust. I have a trading education company, trust1st.com. And so this is from clients firsthand. These were engineers working for Walt Disney. In their late 40s, early 50s, and they were literally told to train the people that they were replacing, knowing that they had less than a year left with the company. And these are foreigners coming in and replacing American workers through this H-1B visa. Now, I don't know of a bigger betrayal to a United States citizen, a tax-paying United States citizen, someone that's raised their family, been a pillar of their community, obviously an excellent professional, or they wouldn't be working at Disney, and then they're pushing them out with foreign workers. If that's not criminal treasonous, I don't know what is. But that's, what they've done in addition to the retirement stuff.
Yeah, it's happening in every country. So let's just kind of move along to what you're doing now. And after your 20 years of trading, right, was there a pivot point or something that made you decide that you wanted to start your own business? I mean, was there something there that made you...
Well, it was kind of a convergence of events. The trading floor was going more and more electronic. More and more volume was leaving the pit and going to the boards. And it was the Mercantile Exchange really pioneered by creating Globex back actually in 1987. I remember voting on it as a member. And they said, well, if we won't do it, somebody else will do it. So we have the resources, we'll get on the ground floor. And we were always trying to catch up to the Board of Trade in our volume, because the most powerful exchange is determined by the volume that gets cleared through that exchange. So we developed Globex, and the charter was it could never run during regular trading hours. It could run at night, but not during regular trading. And then I want to say 1997, 98, maybe a little bit later, we had this referendum that said, okay, we'll let Globex run just for the E-mini. And that was the beginning of the end. And the big argument, the second argument was, well, it's going to be more transparent. People will be able to see the volume 7 up, 7 down, blah, blah, blah. Well, the lesson I learned from all of it was an engineered move to eliminate the trading floor, put it all behind the electronic curtain, because you couldn't see all the off-exchange stuff that was happening. In other words, in the pit, we could see when the Fed was coming in. I mean, it was just obvious the size of the orders and everything else. So the whole landscape was changing. There was less and less opportunity as a pit trader because that volume was going away. And the experience and affirmation that I was gaining, earning, receiving for my thoughts on culture and development because of local knowledge, that had given me more and more confidence for my solution, if you will. And then in 2004, in September, when we lost our technology partner, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff behind that. They got bought out by a defense contractor, didn't want to have anything to do with the financial industries anymore. I should say financial industry. That blew up about 7+ years of my effort. And the other gentleman I co-founded it with, Steve Broznewski, and a lot of money, millions. And I'm, looking at what I've got left and what I know. And that really forced my hand. I put a ton of effort into trust first. But as the electronic trading became more and more mature, it really was that much more difficult for a retail trader. In other words, my value proposition for a trader being successful, or someone that's trying to be successful, or someone that's just coming in, when you talk about, understanding who you are, and people not taking the time to do that, well, I help them to really take the time to understand the trading environment and how they're best aligned to compete in that environment. And one of the biggest things that makes it so difficult for a retail trader to be successful is that they're encouraged to do simulation trading. You have all the tools, you see the money up and down, but it's all fake, if you will, right? And I came up with the term trust first because I realized trading success is proportional to trust. And by starting that sim trading, before you have that foundation to know that alignment and what you have to do to build and earn that trust, you have no chance. And so people shouldn't really start sim trading until at least 9 or 12 months into their training, so they have that trust base, so they can stay focused, spend very little time in sim, and go to real trade. But very few people want to buy that reality, if you will. So I started focusing more and more on the corporate side of it, getting back to the culture, because that's where I knew the biggest benefit could be done. And plus financially, I mean, the scale of selling my program to a large corporation versus an individual, and I had already had it validated at multiple levels at the vice president, or I should say at the executive vice president level at 2 major healthcare companies. And I also, and shortly after I made this commitment to switch, I got validation within the intelligence community at a very high level. And it just has progressed, but the problem is it's so disruptive. In other words, it just really exposes how and why the human resource experts, the culture experts, how they've been painting the outhouse all the time instead of never coming near the barn. That's the nicest way I can put it. And when you understand the mechanics of psychological warfare and how it's executed through the popular culture collective, in other words, entertainment introduces demoralizing and destabilizing behavior, the aligned media propagates it, academia validates it, influencers normalize it, and then corrupt elected officials, bureaucrats, and executives enforce compliance. I mean, just look at COVID. You can see how all of that happened. Okay, you can take environments, see how all of that happened. So I am just keeping my head down and fighting the good fight. And I know sooner or later, I will have significant opportunity. And I believe it's going to happen way sooner because of everything that we see right now that we're talking about on LinkedIn. The environmental fraud is wide out in the open now. So is the COVID, the election stuff, and that is just going to keep increasing. As Trump has to put out his defense, he's going to be coming out with all the hard evidence. The Ukraine stuff's starting to come out. other corruption, as here in the States, we have the House committees that have been investigating the Biden family and the impeachment. All of that is coming to conclusion. All of this stuff is going to come out in the open. There's all sorts of appeals around these different lawsuits. All of that is going to start to come out to the open. What happened on January 6th, we call it a 𝗙𝗘𝗔𝗥. That is starting to come. So the net effect of all of these things coming out, and this happens to be an election year, and in 2020, we had incredible, crazy stuff happen, and I believe it's going to be a factor of that this year, 5, maybe 10 times as crazy, because of the consequences. If good triumphs over evil, which I totally believe it will, we will. But folks, especially folks that have been successful within the structure, if you will, okay, within the corporate structure, within the education structure, they're looking around and their belief system is just being shattered. In other words, their comfort was, no, I'm not a bad guy because I can turn on ABC or CNN, or I can read something in the Wall Street Journal, right? And it's all lockstep with what I believe. So I'm not crazy, right? Ray's a crazy guy because he's telling me these things, but I'm not seeing what Ray's telling me on the television.
Exactly. Right? Tell a vision.
Yep.
Right. So yeah, no, sorry, I didn't want to cut you off there. So, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, I've seen it as a kid growing up and always looked like kind of the black sheep in the family, asking too many awkward questions wherever I went. And then you kind of park it, get on with your education, get a job like you're supposed to do, get married, have some kids, and yeah, have the nice car, the holidays, and the house, and live in debt for the rest of your life. Now, that's what life is about, apparently, right? But once you've experienced and seen a lot, and there was so many trigger points that made you wake up and realize that, well, hang on, that doesn't kind of smell good, right? And then it would happen again. Yeah, I mean, the signs are there in your face all the time. It's just you didn't see them. You didn't know how to read the signs. But then once you have taken off what I call the rose-tinted glasses, you start seeing things clearly. And then I think, is it just me that sees these? And then you discuss it with people that obviously don't feel the same way as you. And the conspiracy theorists, the tinfoil hat wearer, the odd one out, the crazy one, the keep away from me, the guy you don't want to meet down the pub. And yeah, and then you go through that kind of depression and think, maybe I'm an odd one out, maybe I'm weird. And then you find other people are just as weird as you are, if not weirder. And they've been weirder for longer. And then there's no such thing as conspiracy because it's just the truth. The truth is coming out. And we're seeing it, as you said, it can only be suppressed for so long before it starts emerging. And the truth will always prevail. And this is what we're seeing everywhere. And the other side don't like that. So they'll try everything to prevent that happening. And as you said, it's all by design. They've indoctrinated everywhere, every organization, every system, whether it's education or health, to put their narrative forward. And now we're seeing the truth. And more people are actually stepping up and saying something and not just keeping it to themselves anymore. I see there's different groups of people. There's those that were the kind of the early adopters of the truth, and they came out straight away and were ridiculed. And there's the ones that have kind of kept it to themselves and are interested in knowing what's going on, but they don't say anything. And there's ones that are completely clueless, they don't see anything, and they'll believe everything that they hear on the TV. And then there's the ones that think there's something going on, but they don't know what it is, but they'll just carry on with their day job regardless. So there's kind of, I mean, maybe there's more groups, but at some point they have to wake up, because if you just look at, just digressing a bit, what's happening with the farmers at the moment. I mean, if you look, it's in the Netherlands, in Poland, in Germany, in France, in Italy. Yeah, I mean, it's happening. Probably a dozen other
Happening here in
countries.
the States too.
Yes, I mean, it's happening big time and much better organized than like a bunch of guys going down to Parliament Square and trying to do something. I mean, the farmers are speaking out, and people just don't get it. It's not advertised anywhere, but I mean,
But
on mainstream, but we see it because not because we're actually looking for it, is because we're open to understand the truth and what's going on. And why is it being suppressed when it's happening in all of these major cities? Because
well,
because it is the truth, because they don't want us to know what's going on.
their biggest fear has already been realized. They have lost control. Okay. And so we're at a point where people who have older children, or people who have recently retired, still have influence, if you will, who have had this success within the system, as they're waking up, if you will, to see how they've been manipulated, they've been brainwashed, they've been conditioned, they've been played. They got to make a choice. And the simplest way to put that choice is, what is going to be your legacy? Are you going to turn your back on everyone who gave everything just a generation or two ago, and all those before them that gave everything? I mean, here in the States, most of us are immigrants. I can go back on my dad's side and my mom's side to understand, how I ended up here, to understand what they did in World War II and World War I, and what my grandmother did to be able to come over here from Sweden. Now, my grandfather was first generation homesteader in Minnesota, farmer. We really have to have the humility to understand, we stand on the shoulders of giants. And it's because we've taken it for granted, been comfortable, and wanted to go to the cocktail party, instead of saying, you know what, that's not quite right. So now we have this reckoning. And again, we've been conditioned, we've been manipulated in ways people can't imagine. But we have to say no more. We have to understand how to fight. And I'm not talking about violence. I'm talking about understanding the motive and methods of the enemy, the masters of psychological warfare. And when you understand the motives and the method, you can take back control. Now you're ahead of it. Now we protect each other. We're minimizing the economic and human loss to come by building the foundation that's going to allow us to accelerate recovery, repair the massive damage done. And when we understand their motive and methods, we see the strategy that is so simple, that crushes it and makes everything better and takes us to a place we could ever imagine in such a short period of time. And that's what I have. Most people can comprehend the how of psychological warfare, but they don't quite understand why the how works, if you will. And so that's my real value proposition. I help people understand why the how works. And that really is like gets their blood boiling to really, behavior modification is the hardest thing to do.
So you don't do, sorry to interrupt. So
right.
you don't do this alone. So you have a new business which is focusing on this.
Yeah. So the 𝗬𝗘𝗘𝗏.com is my website. The company's Accelerated Intelligence. Why I used the other AI for the website. Again, everyone's been so enamored with artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Well, no, the other AI is accelerating intelligence, just really understanding how you've been robbed of your potential and how to take that back.
Yeah, I love it because I was curious about the name, the other AI. So, yeah, I had to check it out. But I mean, completely in line with you because, yeah, we are much more intelligent than we think.
We're
right?
Massively.
And our potential, which has been starved from us from childhood, because we're born with an imagination and creativity and an abundance of curiosity and willingness to want to learn. But when it's suppressed and put in a box and then indoctrinated for the rest of your life, it's hard to realize the true potential of who you really are. So, yeah, advanced intelligence is, I mean, something that we all have. We just don't know how to harness it.
Well, imagine what happens when folks understand. This is just at the 30,000 foot level how they've taken control.
Maybe you should be more biblical and say 33,000.
Yeah, the numerology of it all, and that's a whole other crazy thing. And I've experienced that power on the trading side of things. That's a great observation. But at its simplest form, and I think I alluded to this before we started the recording, physicists are just consumed by unlocking the secrets of space and time to really get to how to tap into the power of energy and matter, right? I mean, that's CERN, before that, all the other accelerators. That was the objective, to unlock those secrets, to really understand the power and get into enslaving, controlling energy and matter, right? Well, here's the thing. Truth and trust are even more powerful because they unlock the secrets to creation and life. Truth and trust are very, very simple words, way more easier to comprehend than space and time or energy and matter, right? So we hear those words, truth and trust, we stop listening. They're not complex. We believe we already know everything there is to know about truth and trust. So when we stop listening, we just go back and replay whatever we've assigned, whatever interpretation we've assigned to those two words. In other words, our curiosity is completely shut off from really taking a deep dive on their power and construction. We have a thimble understanding. While the propaganda engineers, the masters of psychological warfare, have bucketfuls. I'm not talking silver pails. I'm talking 5-gallon shot buckets. When someone gets that knowledge, everything changes, and that's the knowledge I give them. The science of trust is missing from education, professional training, and organizational development because its exclusion is what allows psychological warfare to work. Science of trust provides a knowledge foundation that's missing from ethics training. When you learn the science of trust, you know how to develop and support high intuitive function. High intuitive function is what develops the superior awareness through which we realize our potential. And our potential is just really beyond our comprehension. But it has just all been shut down because the science of trust has been excluded. And what they've replaced that with is all this messaging work to separate us, detach us from absolute truths that allow us to get to our potential. And fortunately, we're at a time where enough folks are at least familiar with those absolutes, okay? Because of people like us, especially people, the late end of the boomers and, older, who have been able to interact with young people, their grandchildren, their nephews, their neighbors' kids, whatever, and instill some of those absolutes. So what my training does and why it's so powerful and so efficient, it reveals what happens and people can connect to it because they can go back to their own experiences for how it's happened. And their own experiences for the power of these absolutes. And now they start bringing them back to life. And what they're really doing is getting a structure to take our spaghetti bowl of potential and turn it into a lightsaber. And when you have everyone that starts to understand that path, what happens is, and I alluded to earlier, the value of a professional is based on the information flowing to and through them. And that only comes by how much they're trusted. Now we're falling over ourselves to help each other out to build that trust. Our curiosity is on fire. Creativity and imagination is going to the roof. That's what attracts us to each other. We want to be connected with live souls. We collaborate, take each other to even higher levels of awareness, and accomplish things that much faster. It's like a nuclear event of positivity. And so that's what my work takes into an organization. Even if it's just a sole proprietor, helping them to understand and then what they can do with the people they depend on to execute through. What it does, it takes someone who's 40 or 50 years old, who has this frustration that they can't communicate what they want to share. Well, it connects all the dots for them. So they really have that much more appreciation for the wisdom and their capability. And now it gives them the power to communicate it in a very structured way, so it's highly efficient. And this is what I'm so excited about. The solution is so simple. You don't need a high school diploma. You just need to have this fire inside that says, you know what? They tell me to play the victim. I know I've been screwed, but I'm not waiting around for someone to come and rescue me. I appreciate everybody's help. Yeah, and if the government's going to give me something that's going to make it easier, yeah, I'm not going to feel bad about taking it. But bottom line, I can put a little time into this, and now I have everything back. And more importantly, now I have my shield and sword to defend and free others, to be able to say in a very powerful, quiet way, no, you can't do that anymore. You got to connect the dots for me. You got to tell me how your logic is doing good. That's why there's all these personal attacks. That's why there's all this BS, because they know they cannot stand and deliver when it comes to connecting the dots, to proving their method is going to be in the best interest of the human condition.
I love it. It just got me thinking of the saying, knowledge is king, but only if you use it. Because we can read books until we can't absorb any more. But if we don't use it, then what's the point? So it's either using it, sharing it with others, using it yourself to have a better life. But you have to use that. We've all got an abundance of knowledge. I mean, I say there's 3 fundamental reasons for being, right? The first one is to learn. We're here to learn. We constantly learn. We'll never, ever learn everything there is to know about everything. It's impossible. Nobody knows, right? But it's nice to constantly learn and learn something new. Second thing is to serve humanity. If we're not serving one another, then what the hell are we doing? And the third thing is preserve humanity, the generations to come. That's it, period. It's not about how big your house is, how fancy your car is, how much money you earn. These are byproducts. The fundamental reasons for being are to help one another.
That's where all our fulfillment comes from. I, was fortunate at a young age where I was making a ton of money trading. I could do whatever I wanted. I've been heli skiing in the Monteshis. I've played at the best golf courses. I could go out and buy any car I wanted. I didn't do that because that just wasn't my thing. I just wanted to get to point A to point B and not worry about my car when I parked it. You know what I'm saying? But that was a blessing at a young age, because I realized, especially as I started having a family, where real happiness came from. It wasn't the material things. It was supporting and protecting others. And I've just, the more I've done this work and the feedback that I've gotten from my trading customers, the feedback that I've gotten from the folks that who were senior intelligence officers that I did a proof of concept with, and the way they validated it and embraced it, it's just the fulfillment from that and the energy. It's just, there's no greater feeling. There's no greater feeling. And again, excuse me one sec. I have a bad sinus. That's my.
All right. Yeah, you mentioned, I mean, you're 65, so congratulations on that. So there's no plans to retire. I mean,
Never.
I asked that for a reason. So sorry, what did you say? Never.
Never.
Yeah, exactly. As I talked about Ikigai, which was the guide that followed me, Iki being life and Gai mean purpose. If you follow your Ikigai, it's a Japanese words, right? Japanese philosophy, right? The thing is, you never retire, because why would you ever retire from the things that you love doing? Why would I stop wanting to get out of bed to do something I love? I mean, my thing is storytelling and like having people share their story as well, but storytelling for everything, right? Now, why would I want to stop doing that? I love it. Just because you get to 65 or whatever the retirement age is, do I want to stop doing it? I want to do it till the day I die.
It gets back to legacy, okay? And what I want, and I did this with coaching. Whenever I had the opportunity to step away as a coach, I took it, because I wanted somebody else to have that growth, have that experience with their children, build themselves up within the community, because I know there'll never be a shortage of stuff for me to do. It's just, when we think about legacy, what I want my legacy to be is that no matter what, I just had the conviction to keep going deeper. And through that conviction, it was really driven by the humility to understand you got to stand and deliver. You can't BS people. You got to draw straight lines. And that's where our conviction comes. We can't move off our spot. It's not that we can't understand it better, but there are absolutes that just can never be replaced. And just a powerful example of that, family and community are universal, because there is nothing, no entity that is better suited to be aware of the needs, the ability to nurture, support, and protect an individual, bar none. Strong families form strong communities. Strong communities protect their families when they're in hardship. Strong communities attract other communities, and they leverage that economy of scale more and more, but it's all because of trust, okay? Evil has targeted family and community because it knows they're its greatest enemy. So they've targeted family with divorce, abortion, feminism, and most recently, gender confusion. They've targeted community by constantly increasing taxes and telling folks, hey, yeah, you're paying more, but don't worry, we're just going to get that much more back to you for your schools and your law enforcement and infrastructure and hospitals and emergency services, whatever it is. And so look at what's happened to family, the void that they've been able to step into. Look at what that compliance has done to the quality of education, the quality of healthcare, law enforcement, the quality of infrastructure. I mean, cities are absolutely filthy. Education is collapsing. Law enforcement is now the enemy. And it's all by design. We got to get back to the absolutes of family and community.
Yeah.
And then we'll really start finding our way again.
I completely agree. I mean, trust and truth, I actually mentioned a lot. I mean, I would say without them, I mean, these are the foundations for the building blocks for what we need. If we can't trust people, which there's our so-called leaders are not leaders, and we can't trust them, right? And I just want to kind of wrap this up in a minute. So I just want you to maybe touch more on the services that you offer. Do you do it alone? Is there a team of you? And how do you deliver these? Are they local? Are they in person? Are they online? And how do people then contact you?
Well, the services, the descriptions are on demand. And you can go to 𝗬𝗓𝗙𝗚𝗏.com and click on store and sign in, and you can see where the services start at. And they start very basic, and then they get into executive coaching. And so that is done remotely. I've been hired to go and do, speak to groups for a couple days at a time, things like that. I'm flexible. I have a group behind me. You can read about them on the About page at 𝗬𝗓𝗙𝗚𝗏.com. Other people that can get involved when needed. But I just, so it's on demand. Someone can basically go to the Other AI right now and within minutes start something. Just going back to truth and trust again, one of the absolutes communicated in modern times, if you will, is that it's trust, not technology, determines how fast and well the brain filters, processes, and applies information. People are brainwashed to think that it's technology. It's trust. The more we trust, the more we think independently, and that whole chain of events goes. And it's trust that determines the value of an individual, team, or organization. And it's trust that determines if the world lives in peace, abundance, or poverty, conflict, and war. And nobody ever expresses that. And it should be a public service announcement that goes out multiple times a day. You know, there's used to be this ad campaign, you know, just do it, or got milk, right? Should be, whose trust did you earn today?
Yeah. If you think about it in sports, it's about trust. I mean, I'm just thinking off the top of my head that my son does the relay and they've got to pass the baton. You trust the guy that's passing the baton to you. He's going to get you that baton so you can do your leg and then pass it on to the next, so that everybody's got to trust. I also thought about diving. I did some scuba diving, and then you're buddying up with a buddy, and they've got the spare respirator. If you get into trouble with both of yours, your buddy is there, and you trust that they know what they're doing, and you trust that they're going to be there when you need them. So, yeah, if you just think about the workplace, are there any colleagues there that you can 100% trust that's got your back? Can you trust in stuff you hear on the news? Can you trust? I mean, trust is the fundamental for everything.
We'll go back to the workplace just for a second. And again, this is all by design. You know, as technology keeps advancing, and again, in the training, I go through this progression, but in 2020, 5G came online, and that increased the power of the internet 100 times over 4G. People don't realize this. And what that really enabled was all the Bluetooth stuff, Internet of Things, radio frequency identifier tag technology, right? Well, that massively increased the generation of personal data to be harvested and then used to profile and target the individual for manipulation. And so as technology has increased, the power of psychological warfare to corrupt has increased exponentially. So what's happened in the workplace, and I'm talking about remote workers, even though they're not physically in a workplace, they have no comprehension of how overwhelmed they are. They don't have the bandwidth to care about what's happening to a coworker. They don't have the bandwidth to really understand what's next for the customer. And it's all by design. We're just getting crushed. And remember, the dynamic of competition is to keep doing more with less in a shorter period of time. And that technology keeps compressing it. And leaders who have the visibility to understand, they're the ones that have to have that future vision to keep the business, to direct the team, to be productive. They have tremendous visibility. The team doesn't. And they just keep pushing this stuff down to the team, and they're frustrated as to why the team isn't performing. And their solution is, well, they get rid of some, they hire more, maybe they increase the headcount. They never solve the problem of improving the awareness, the capability of the team to keep up with that compressing competitiveness.
Exactly. I always relate it to sports, use the analogy of like football team, soccer team, whatever. Because if you're not working as a team, you're going to fail. But the thing is, even in a soccer team, right, you could go out there, give your 100%, and still the other teams won. Now, it could have been luck, it could have been fluke, it could have been because they were the better team on the day, right? And you failed. But it shouldn't be looked as a negative. It should be looked as a learning. How can we improve? And we're not going to finger point and blame everybody else. We're going to learn from that, and we're going to pick ourselves up, and we're going to go out there and win the next one. But they don't do it like that. I've never been in a team like that. It's finger pointing. You're to blame.
And again, another great analogy in professional sports, really, in any club, high school, it's the team that makes the most plays is the one that wins. In other words, everyone out there has a given level of skill, smarts, strength, speed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's the ones that have the highest awareness that are going to see the most opportunities, make the most plays. That's what it comes down to. And again, that's one of the things that my training does for athletes and teams. It's just, anyway, business, it's the ones with the greatest awareness best anticipate client, customer, team, and organizational needs.
Exactly.
These are things that have been taken off of the human, discounted from our potential, if you will, to say, no, we need a machine to do that. We need to put a chip in your brain. And if you'll indulge me and just, this is a huge public service warning that I want to give to folks to think about this. The brain is the only mechanism capable of integrating the mind, heart, and gut to know who, what, and when to trust. Okay? The mind integrates, or I should say, the mind is responsible for the analysis, decision, action cycle. The heart creates harmony between the physical and spiritual worlds. And the gut is connected to instinct. Those are behaviors shared by a species necessary to survive. Earlier you said you just knew in your gut it wasn't right. Okay? So I don't believe artificial intelligence is anywhere near as advanced as people think that is. Okay? One of the people I have tremendous respect for has explained why, and it gets back to our body driven by hormones, and machines don't have hormones. That's all I'll basically say. But when we allow ourselves to be chipped, we open ourselves up to the risk of AI figuring out real quick, hey, I can help the mind with that analysis, decision, action cycle, but I can't replicate the heart or the gut function. So what do you think it's going to do? It's going to cut out the heart and the gut, and we become nothing more than a human droid.
Yeah, good food for thought. That's definitely not what we are designed for. So I want to remain as human as possible. And yeah, I'm not a fan of AI. I can see, I mean, for some things it can be beneficial, but for other things, yeah, keep well away from it. It was quite ironic. I mean, I was in the supermarket buying something, and there's a cashier that works there, but everything besides this lone cashier are these machines that you go and you do it yourself, basically. And there's a big queue of people doing it, do it yourself. I thought, well, I'll go to the cashier. I always go to the cashier, right? Because I can ask the cashier, like, the time of day. I mean, is she okay? Did she have a good day? I mean, stuff like that. I could pass my time with her and make her happy, and I leave with a smile on my face as well, right? You can't do that with a machine, right? So these people with the machines, there was a problem. So then the cashier had to then call an assistant to come and help, because the machine doesn't say hello to you. Well, maybe it does, but there's no emotion there. It's just programmed. But when there's a problem, it can't help you. They have to get a live person to go and figure out the machine. So I'm all against that. I mean, I would definitely rather give up what's supposed to be convenience rather than the human touch. What was the convenience? All right, maybe you could get your shopping a bit quicker. But I thought, well, the human touch is I can speak to a real person. And if I'm a lonely person, I'm at home and I don't meet anyone, and my only contact is the person, the cashier in the supermarket, then if I can speak to them, they can speak to me back. I feel like I'm still alive. And that's how I see it. How much value did I get? Right. It cost me maybe a bit more time, but the value I got out of that is irreplaceable. You cannot replicate that from the machine. So I know I completely digressed a bit there.
No, not at all. Not at all.
But this is the way that the world is going. Automate everything. And I'm thinking, no, there's some certain things you do not automate. Keep us human. That's the way we were designed to be. Like, as you said, advance your own intellect and your own knowledge, and then you became the superhuman. You don't need any chips or anything else inside you to make that happen. You just need some learning.
So consider getting back to the human interaction. And this is what bothers me with all the social media interaction, if you will. Like, just take our experience on LinkedIn, right? It's great because it's created connections like these where we can go deeper, right? And we're doing much more than just reposting something or sharing a comment, though that's all very, very valuable, reinforcing, liking stuff, encouraging, and everything else. But the most valuable thing we can do, as I said before, is offline, in real life with other people, one-on-one, how we conduct ourselves. You know, one of the things, most powerful things that I remind people at every opportunity, think about how you've been influenced by the actions of a stranger. You saw them do a random act of kindness, stand up for somebody, shut down a bully, you know, and, you know, how that influenced you. Or your kids that were with you when you point out and say, hey, do you see what that lady did? Or you see what that man did? Or do you see how nice that kid was, how polite he was, how respectful he was? Well, we need to appreciate the power we have through our actions to inspire others. I don't think we remain anywhere near as conscious of that power as we need to be. Imagine if we got out of bed every morning. You know, I said the service announcement should be, whose trust did you earn today, right? Well, imagine we get out of bed every day when the back of our head is, who am I going to inspire today? Who am I going to inspire today? Who am I going to help today? And you know, these are just simple, powerful things that are nowhere to be found in our cultural messaging, our corporate messaging. You don't go into a lunchroom or a break room and see a sign, whose trust did you earn today? Who did you help today? Who did you inspire today?
No, this is absolutely beautiful. I just makes me think of many different things, but typically I get the local train into the city, and yeah, it's quite sad because you get on the train and nobody looks at anyone anymore. Their heads are down with their mobile phone. And yeah, I remember when I was first going to my first job, I think I was 17 at the time, on the bus going to work, on a double-decker bus in England, right? And I always sat in the back seats at the lower deck, and yeah, it was kind of my seat. It was always there, but there's no phones in those days. And I like to observe people. So in those days, you'd see who got on the bus and what, and you'd make friends because people would always come and sit in kind of their seats. Although it wasn't technically their seat, but they're always in the same kind of seats. And you'd know that. So you'd learn the people and they'd smile and you'd pass the time of day. That has gone. I mean, you don't, nobody looks at anyone anymore. If you look at someone now on the train, yeah, they'll think you're a pervert or something, or a weirdo. If you smile at someone, well, that's not normal, is it? Right? And it's just a sad world that we live in, that it's got to this stage. And I'm trying to bring that back. So I make the effort every time I go to the supermarket, right, with the cashier. So she even said to me, she said, I miss it when you don't come in here. And that made me feel good. It made me feel sad that she had to say that. And I'm thinking, but it made me feel good in the way that she did say that. And I look at her as there all day long. And maybe most of the time, nobody says a word to her.
Go back to COVID.
Yeah.
Remember, one of the biggest things was they shut down the beauty salons, the restaurants, the pubs, the sporting events, right? You couldn't even have a funeral. Couldn't get married, couldn't have your family together to celebrate a birthday. Because what they feared was us being together in real life, being able to experience that raw emotion, read the body language, see that care, and have a conversation about what was going on. Say, look, does this make any sense to you?
No.
Doesn't compute with anything that I know or that I've researched. I'm not seeing it anywhere near as bad as they're telling us that it is. You know, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't, you know, and then talk about the statistics and
yeah, how
the
did
risk
it,
and everything else. They didn't want that to happen.
exactly?
And they've been doing everything they can to shut down and limit that human action. They don't want that collaboration, elevating awareness, inspiring, realizing potential.
But how ironic it was. I mean, you couldn't have more than 5 people in a gathering in your home, right? So if you had 6 people, that someone could report you to the police or something, right? We've got 6 people there. Well, what's the difference between 5 and 6, right? I mean, it's like from one day to the next to say, right, as from Monday, you don't need to wear a mask anymore. I think kind of globally all stopped at the same time. I think, well, what's the difference? What's the difference now? Was it before? I mean, if it was really that bad, we should be wearing the masks, but obviously it wasn't. But anyway.
Well, there's no scientific efficacy for them. They actually, it's proven they do more harm than good.
Exactly.
They've proven that the people that wore masks were more likely to get COVID than people who didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I see people nowadays putting them back on again. I'm thinking, idiots. I mean, that's what I'm saying about the different groups of people. These will believe whatever you tell them, right?
Well, it just shows the power of the messaging and the conditioning.
It does. I know we could talk about this all night long, right? Well, for me anyway, it's getting late, right? And I don't normally do shows as long as this one, but it's been extremely interesting, and there's so much to learn. And yeah, you also mentioned offline about you've got a series of videos, very short videos that people can look in and watch them to get a flavor of what you do. So I've started going through them anyway, and I think they're excellent. I think everybody should to do that. So we're going to share the links of the website and information that you want to put out there, and I'll put those in the notes.
Okay.
So just on closing, unless you've got anything else that you really need to say, otherwise we'll close this. And on closing, is there any final remarks or comments or observations or anything that you want to leave us with?
Well, James, I want to thank you for fighting the good fight and inspiring the people that you do, and being the man that you are for your family and friends. And to everyone else out there, family, community, and those 17 videos, it's about 95 minutes total runtime. It will give you an overview of the history, the methods, and the strategy defeating psychological warfare. Again, just 95 minutes. And if you don't watch the videos, at least consider this. Evil counts, I should say, on us believing we know things that we don't and control things that we can't. That triggers human nature to take the path of least resistance. If we believe we know things that we don't and control things that we can't, there's nothing for us to do. We can go on our happy-go-lucky way and be that much more controlled and manipulated. Have the humility to understand we stand on the shoulders of giants. Take the time to ask yourself, what is your legacy going to be? How are you protecting your children, your grandchildren in the future? What is your legacy going to be? Will you stand and fight, or will you be indifferent and ignorant? Do not go gently into that good night.
Amen.
Thank you, James.
Yeah, thanks, Ray, for that. And it's been an absolute pleasure. And yeah, we'll keep in touch anyway. And as soon as I've got this ready to put out, I'll confirm it with you, and then you can share it likewise.
I'm very much looking forward to that.
So have a wonderful weekend. And yeah, and I wish you great success in everything that you do. And I think this year is definitely a turning point year for humanity.
You are so right. And the same to you. I look forward to our next conversation.
Okay. Thanks.
God bless.
Likewise. Bye.
Wow, that was another featured business brought to you by Visibility Impact. If you'd like to be our next featured guest or learn how James Moffat can help you leverage on the art and power of interactive storytelling for your business, reach out and schedule a call now.